What do we do about what happened to Rabbi Shlomo Naginsky on Thursday? What do we do about a man, a husband, a father of 12, a Chabad rabbi who lives in Kfar Chabad in Israel? So if you're a Chabad rabbi, there's just no better place than Kfar Chabad in Israel. And he uproots his wife, and he uproots 12 children, and he leaves Israel, and he comes to Brighton. And he comes as an act of ideals and idealism. The Hebrew word is shaliach. God sent me here. I'm a shaliach. The point of my life is not my life. I'm a shaliach. The point of my life is to serve something larger than my life. I'm a shaliach. I got a mission, I'm a shaliach. I got a message, I'm a shaliach. I got a boss, I'm a shaliach. I so believe in my message, and I so believe in the one who sent me. My life has so much purpose. I say to my wife, and I say to my 12 kids one night, we're going to Brighton. And they get to Brighton, and he's doing his holy work, and he's teaching. And then Thursday, midday, right in front of the Shiloh house, he's attacked brutally at gunpoint and at knife point, and he is stabbed 8 times. And by the way, that's 2 miles from here. So what do we do? So first thing, we feel deep anxiety and concern. Because make no mistake about it, that is a hate crime. That is a hate crime. That is stabbing somebody who's a Chabad rabbi because he's Jewish is a hate crime. And what's so scary about it is that we all know there's been such a frightening uptick in anti-Semitism, such a frightening uptick in hate crimes against the Jewish people, particularly since the war in May. We all know, we've all read, we've all seen, we've all sent emails to each other. Jews getting attacked because they're eating sushi at a sushi restaurant. Jews getting attacked because they're walking on the streets of New York. And now a Jew getting attacked because he's teaching children 2 miles from here at the Shiloh house. And by the way, this happens on the eve of the 4th of July, which is supposed to celebrate what? Security, opportunity, that we're home here. We got troubles at home. Now, what do? So we realize that, oh my God, there's a lot of hate crimes against Jews, and it's not just at sushi restaurants, and it's not just in New York, it's 2 miles from here. And so what do? We're on high alert. So we hire police, and we have cruisers, 385 Ward Street, and we have armed guards. Now, here's the thing. This has been happening for a while. This has been happening since Pittsburgh. We're almost getting used to it. But can I just say, just because we've gotten used to it, should not blind us from the fact that this is crazy that it's happening. It's not okay. It is not okay. In fact, it's deeply sick that we need police to pray. It's not okay. It's not okay that we need to hire, should it be 2 armed personnel, 3 armed guards, 4 armed guards with police, with knives, with guns, with arms, with preparing their fight. They're going to protect us so we can pray. That's not okay. That should not be happening in Massachusetts in 2021, but it is. It's happening today. It's happening now. And it's happening here. And so, here's what we need to do. We need to think about a world where we are and where we feel safe and secure to pray without the police. We need to think about a world where we are and where we feel safe and secure without armed guards. And the question is, how do we get to that world? And what do we do? Because I'm going to tell you something. Everybody in here has a role to play to create that world. Now, this week, I heard the most simple and the most stunning observation about America, made, of course, by somebody who's not an American, made by Daniel Hartman. And here's what he says. He says, America is just a wonderful country. It's just such a blessing. We who live here are blessed to live here. Our children and our grandchildren who live here, they are blessed to live here. The world is so much better off because America is in it. That's all true. And America is a land that is filled with hatred and violence. It is filled with hatred and violence, especially against minorities. And it always has been, and it is now. Hatred and violence against Black Americans. You have to be in denial and delusion if you don't see that. Hatred and violence against Asian Americans, you have to be in denial if you don't see that. Hatred and violence against Jews, we're not in denial about that. Hatred and violence against minorities, hatred and violence. That's real. So step back. It's a land of beauty and ideals. That's true. And it's a land of hatred and violence, and that's true. And so the question is, what do we do about our walking, living, breathing American paradox? Now, here's what's just so amazing. This is another reason you come to shul. Not only because you see all these cool simchas and weddings and babies and anniversaries, 70 years, that's cool. But every week, the weekly Torah portion speaks directly to our question. Our question is, what do we do with the living paradox that is America? And our Torah reading is named Pinchas, for a man who is a living paradox. So, the story is that at the end of last week's reading, the Israelites commit this big sin. It's called the sin of Baal Peor. To use the Torah's language, the Israelite men go whoring with the Moabite women. So there's massive idolatry, there's massive adultery, there's massive immorality. It's not a good look. It's a low moment. And this reaches its lowest point at the end of the reading. An Israelite man named Zimri and a Midianite woman named Cosbi are having relations in public. And it's just so in your face that the leaders, including Moses, say, oh my God, I have no play in my playbook for this. There's no template for this. And they are paralyzed and they are weeping. And in comes Pinchas, who is the grandson of Aaron, and he has a spear and he stabs the lovers in the act and they die. Now, Pinchas took the law into his own hands. Pinchas was the judge and the jury and the executioner all at the same time. Pinchas gave them no due process. Pinchas was violent. Pinchas was a vigilante. By the way, Pinchas violated every rule of Jewish criminal procedure. So you might think that Pinchas would get critiqued. You might even think Pinchas would get punished. But it seems to be, in the first aliyah, the Rishon of Pinchas, that God double rewards him. God gives him a covenant of eternal peace and a covenant of eternal priesthood. And I have to say that for the first 59 years I encountered this portion, I always checked out. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't understand it. Why is God rewarding a violent vigilante? But now, the stabbing of Rabbi Naginsky on the eve of the 4th of July has caused me to reevaluate this. Maybe, just maybe, God gives Pinchas these eternal covenants not to reward him, but to change him. Not to reward him, but to make him grow and learn and deepen and to become a better version of himself. After all, just consider the effects of these. What happens to Pinchas now? So now he's a priest. Now he works every day in the temple. What happens in the temple every day? Every day he meets families, and they come with emotions. And he prescribes rituals for their emotions. Hey, Pinchas, I'm super grateful. Just marked my 70th anniversary and my granddaughter is getting married. Pinchas helps them offer a gratitude sacrifice. Hey, Pinchas, I'm super anxious. My loved one's on the operating table. Pinchas has like an anxiety sacrifice. Pinchas, I really messed up. I'm feeling really, 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 really guilty. He offers them a guilt sacrifice. In other words, Pinchas brings all these families to a place of peace. And guess what happens in the interim? He becomes a man of peace. This is biblical rehab. This is biblical reform. And it works. When you look at his life story, he has one moment of violence and many years of peaceful service. God's plan changes him from violent vigilante to peaceful priest. Now, what does this say about what we do about our walking paradoxes? This is just so cool. This is, to me, just so important. I think the Torah in Pinchas is saying, it's not just America that's a walking paradox. It's not just Israel that's a walking paradox. Every one of us is a walking paradox, and every one of us have people in our lives that we love, we really do, and they are walking paradoxes. They have their nobler angels, oh my God, nobler angels, and they have less noble angels, believe me, less noble angels, and both are true. All men are created equal, true. Internment camp for Japanese, true. And what the Torah tells us, what do we do when we have a walking paradox? Grow. Evolve. Deepen. Become a better version of yourself. If you're a walking paradox, do the work. Do the hard work of acknowledging your noble angels and your less noble angels, and then do the hard work of helping your noble angels be ascendant. Now, what does that look like? Let's bring this down to earth. Let's bring that down to now. What does that look like? So I really wish, there were some kind of magic pill, and we could take it, and we could prescribe it, and then the hatred and the violence that is also a part of the American story would magically disappear. But that pill does not exist. We cannot make hatred and violence magically disappear. But here's something that we can all do. Micha Goodman channeled the wisdom of our nation's founders when years ago he observed that our nation never sought, our founders never sought to create a perfect union. Rather, a more perfect union. More perfect, not perfect. That means better than yesterday. Here's our job. Do your part to make it a more perfect union. Local, here. Less hate, more love. Local, here. Less hate, more love. Build a better world through better relationships. Now, a lot of that is already happening by ordinary people. It's already happening because of you. It's ordinary people who, for more than 30 years, have been supporting the food pantry and the soup kitchen of the Mass Avenue Baptist Church in Cambridge, and been funding it through the Project Manna concerts, and have been serving turkeys on Thanksgiving and Christmas meals and serving every week. That's ordinary people. It's ordinary people who, even though we were in the grip of a pandemic and for 2 years we couldn't have a Project Manna concert, and Elias, as a gesture of love and labor of love, working with our tech guy, Andrew Hanlon, put together a virtual concert. And would you know that our members contributed more to Project Manna this year than ever in more than 30 years? That's ordinary people. It's ordinary people who went into a very serious months-long dialogue with the Western Avenue Baptist Church, also of Cambridge, about caste in America, the reality of caste, as explained by Isabel Wilkerson in her book called Caste. So it's ordinary people, our members, you, who are on Zooms, listening to Jeremy Battle, the pastor of Western Avenue, and he's our neighbor. He lives across the street from the Cabot School. And he shared a plaintive story. What he shared, I did not know. What he shared, I would not have believed. What if he shared, I would have denied. What he shared, I would have rejected. But he shared it, so I had to hear it, and I had to see him, and I had to listen to him, and I had to do a cheshbon hanefesh myself. Here's what he shared. He lives across the street from the Cabot School. He lives in Newton. He lives in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He lives a mile from here. And he said he never walks out of his house to take a walk in Newton without worrying that some neighbor in Newton who doesn't like black people is going to call the cops on him. And that when they do, and the cops come, who knows what will be? Newton, Cabot School. And he said, therefore, on a cold day, he won't wear a cap, because he's doing everything he can to be intentional about forestalling the nervous call from the neighbor who doesn't like black people. Now, that was very hard to hear. But here's what happened when we heard him. People on the call from our shul, ordinary members, said, what can we do? And we looked for things we could do to actually help, and Reverend Battle said, actually, his church is resource constrained, resource challenged, has some real estate issues. They need a new home. He said, are there any lawyers on this call? The answer was yes. And he was looking for some real estate lawyers who could help them find a new home, and he got great pro bono legal help from the Cast Dialogues. And he said they're going to have a new home, the best home they've ever had in the church's history. Now, that's good. And that's right on its own terms. End of the story, end of the sermon. That's good and that's right on its own terms. You don't even need the rest of the sermon. If all we did was that, dayenu. If all we did was help a church feed the hungry, dayenu. If all we did was listen to a man's painful story and do a cheshbon hanefesh, dayenu. If all we did was help a church find a home, dayenu, good enough. But there's more. Because it's not only good on its own, it's also helpful to us. Because in a world of rising anti-Semitism, we need friends. And friends come about through relationships. So a few weeks ago in May, the Cambridge City Council tried again to get a BDS petition passed against Israel. They tried a few years ago and it failed. They tried again. And make no mistake about it, this petition, BDS, Cambridge has a foreign policy. This is not about stopping hummus and wine from Israel to go into Cambridge. This is about turning Israel into a pariah state. This is about saying that decent people in Cambridge do not, cannot, and will not support Israel. This is about bullying people who support Israel into silence. This is a cancer of hate that deepens and it spreads. And there was a lot of energy around it, particularly with the war. So I called up Jeremy. And I called up Brenda. And I said, we need you. We need you now. All of our work is about combating hate. This is hate. Would you bring your moral profile as leaders of your churches to the Cambridge City Council and object to BDS on moral terms because it's just hatred, pure and simple. And they said yes. And they did. And it was defeated again. What do we do with the walking paradox that is our beloved land on the eve of the 4th of July? Try to make it better and stronger. A better world through better relationships, not a perfect union, but a more perfect union. Local now. Local. Less hate. More love. That takes work every single day. And that takes one other thing. That takes every one of you. Let's get to work. Shabbat Shalom.